Right now, in a house not so different from yours, the power goes out. No warning, no countdown, just darkness. And in that first minute, almost nobody reaches for a flashlight. They reach for their phone. That's the natural instinct. But here's the part almost no one expects. In a real emergency, that phone in your hand might not work the way you think it will. Not because it's broken, not because you forgot to charge it, but because of something most people have never even considered. Think about the last time your whole neighborhood lost power or a storm rolled through your town. Did you notice how hard it suddenly became to get a call through? You weren't imagining it? When thousands of people in the same area try to call or text at the exact same moment, the network gets overloaded. It's not your signal, it's the traffic. And when everyone reaches for their phone at once, calls can drop and lines can jam right when people need them the most. This single fact quietly breaks one of the most common assumptions people carry into an emergency. We assume that if something goes wrong, we'll just call someone. We'll figure it out in the moment. But what if the moment doesn't give you that option? This is where the real story begins. Not with hurricanes or wildfires or headline disasters, but with an uncomfortable question. If something happened right now, today, would you actually know what to do in the first 15 minutes? Not eventually, not after some research, right now. Most people, if they're honest, would hesitate. Picture an ordinary Tuesday evening. Dinner is almost ready. The kids are doing homework. Then the lights flicker once, twice, and go out completely. Somewhere outside, a transformer has failed, or a storm has knocked down a line. For the first few seconds, it feels almost funny. A minor inconvenience. Someone jokes about finding the candles, but then 10 minutes pass, then 30, and the phone shows barely any signal, just enough for emergency calls. That's the moment the joke stops. That's the moment most families realize they never actually talked about what happens next. And that hesitation is not a personal failure. It's far more common than you'd think. Survey data from FEMA shows that just over half of American adults believe they are prepared for a disaster. That number has slowly climbed over the years. But here's the twist that catches most people off guard. Only about 1 in 4 Americans say they feel truly confident they'd know what to do if a major disaster actually happened. Confidence and belief are not the same thing. A lot of people believe they're ready without actually feeling ready. That gap between believing and knowing is where the real problem hides. So what fills that gap for most people? Supplies, water, canned food, flashlights, batteries. And to be fair, those things matter. FEMA's own research shows that the most common action people take to prepare is exactly that, gathering or updating emergency supplies. It's the first thing that comes to mind for almost everyone. But here's the part that surprised even researchers. When you look at what government preparedness agencies actually recommend as the starting point, supplies aren't step 1. They're not even step 2. The very first things on the list are almost invisible. A plan, a way to reach your family, a way to receive a warning before disaster even reaches your door. Most people skip straight past these steps without realizing they exist. It's a bit like assuming a house needs furniture before it needs a foundation. The furniture is what you notice first. It's what fills the rooms, what makes a place feel lived in. But none of it matters much if the foundation underneath was never poured. Supplies are the furniture of preparedness. A plan is the foundation. And most people are decorating a house that was never actually built. There's another quiet reason gear gets so much attention and plans get so little. Independent surveys have found that a large share of Americans point to the cost of supplies as the main reason they don't feel fully prepared. Some report having none of the recommended items in their home at all. Money becomes the excuse, and a real one for many families. But the irony is hard to miss. The steps that actually come first, according to official guidance, don't cost anything close to what a fully stocked supply kit does. In some cases, they don't cost a single dollar. Yet because supplies are what preparedness looks like in most people's minds, cost becomes a barrier to something that was never actually the starting point. Why does that happen? Part of it comes down to how our brains are wired. There's a well-known pattern in psychology called normalcy bias. It's the quiet assumption that because something hasn't happened to us before, it probably won't happen at all. It's not laziness. It's not denial exactly either. It's more like a mental shortcut, one that keeps us calm during ordinary days, but works against us the moment something extraordinary happens. That shortcut whispers, it won't be that bad. It whispers, I'll deal with it if it happens. And so the emergency plan gets pushed to another day and another, until eventually it's not on the to-do list anymore. It's just quietly forgotten. Meanwhile, the data tells a slightly different story about what actually helps. People who received clear information about how to prepare were 5 times more likely to take real action compared to people who hadn't. 5 times. Not because the information was complicated, but because it gave them somewhere to start. And that's the part almost nobody talks about. You don't need hours of research. You don't need a garage full of gear. According to the very same guidelines that emergency agencies use, the first real steps take minutes, not months. Let's walk through what those steps actually look like, because once you see them, the whole picture changes. The first one is almost embarrassingly simple. It's picking a meeting place. Not a vague idea like, we'll figure it out. An actual, specific spot. Somewhere just outside your home, in case you can't go back inside. And another spot, a little further away, in case your whole neighborhood has to leave. Official guidance recommends choosing something specific. A certain tree, a certain corner, a particular bench, not just the park. Because in the middle of confusion, vague plans fall apart and specific ones hold. The second step is about connection, not gadgets. It's choosing one person, ideally someone outside your immediate area, who your family agrees to contact if you're separated. Local lines can get jammed during a widespread emergency, but a call routed through someone further away often has a better chance of getting through. It sounds almost too simple to matter, but this one detail solves the exact problem we started with. The fear of being unable to reach the people you love. And this leads to something else almost no one considers. If phone calls struggle to get through, what does work? According to official emergency guidance, text messages often succeed where calls fail. That's because a text takes up a tiny fraction of the network compared to a call, so it can slip through even when the lines are jammed. It's a small shift in thinking, but it could be the difference between silence and reassurance during those first uncertain minutes. The third step is the one most people have never even heard of, and it takes less than a minute: signing up for local emergency alerts. These are the notifications that can reach you before a storm arrives, before an evacuation order goes out, before the situation on your street changes. And here's something that should raise an eyebrow. Even though awareness campaigns have grown, the percentage of people signing up for these alerts actually dropped in recent years, even as more people were buying supplies. People are stocking their pantries, but skipping the one step that might warn them early enough to use those supplies at all. Put those 3 things together: a meeting place, an outside contact, and an alert sign up, and you have something interesting. None of it costs money. None of it requires a single trip to the store, and all of it can be done in about the time it takes to watch this video. There's a reason official guidance treats practicing the plan as almost as important as making it. A plan that only lives in one person's head tends to disappear exactly when it's needed most. Data on this is fairly consistent. Most people who make an emergency plan never actually rehearse it. They write it down, feel a small sense of relief, and move on. But a plan nobody has practiced tends to fall apart under stress. The same way a fire drill that's only read on paper rarely works when the alarm actually goes off. Saying it out loud once, at dinner, costs nothing and takes less than a minute. So why doesn't everyone just do it? Because the story we tell ourselves about preparedness is usually the wrong one. We picture bunkers, stockpiles, complicated gear, and hours of planning. That picture feels overwhelming, so we quietly avoid starting at all. But the actual first steps look nothing like that picture. They look more like a conversation at the dinner table, a few minutes on a phone, a decision made once that quietly protects you later. There's a quiet cost to skipping these steps, and it's not always dramatic. It's not always a headline disaster. Sometimes it's simply the moment the power goes out during a storm and no one in the house knows what the plan is. Or the moment a phone call won't connect and there's no backup plan for what to do next. Small moments, but moments that suddenly feel very large when you're standing inside them. Think back to that Tuesday evening, the one with the flickering lights and the dead phone signal. In one version of that night, the family has no plan. They argue softly about whether to stay or go. Someone tries calling a relative 6 times before giving up. The kids sense the tension, even if no one says it out loud. In another version of that same night, someone simply says, "Remember our plan," and the room settles. Everyone already knows the meeting spot. Someone sends a short text instead of dialing. It's not a dramatic difference. It's a quiet one. But it's the difference between confusion and calm, and almost nothing about it required money or time. It required a decision that had already been made. It's worth pausing on why this particular fear, the fear of losing touch with the people you love, hits so much harder than the fear of running out of batteries or bottled water. Supplies feel replaceable. You can always find more food, more water, more gear, eventually. But not knowing whether your spouse, your kids, or your parents are safe is a different kind of discomfort entirely. It doesn't fade with a trip to the store. That's likely why the very first official guidance focuses on communication before anything else. It's not because supplies don't matter. It's because the fear a communication plan solves is the one that's hardest to sit with. And here's the perspective shift worth sitting with. Preparedness was never really about predicting disaster. It's about removing hesitation. It's about making sure that in the most stressful, disorienting moment of your day, you and your family already know the first 3 moves. Not because you memorized a script, but because you made the decision in advance, back when your mind was calm and clear. That's the real difference between the people who freeze when something goes wrong and the people who simply act. It usually isn't confidence. It isn't experience. It's usually just this. They already decided what to do, long before they needed to. So maybe the real question isn't whether something will happen someday. Maybe it's simpler than that. If it happened tonight, would your family know where to meet? Would you know who to call? Would you even hear the warning in time? 15 minutes is a strange amount of time. It's barely enough to make a cup of coffee, but it's apparently enough to change how prepared your entire household is for whatever comes next. If you'd like to explore some helpful resources, you'll find them in the description.